Once upon a time, there lived a married couple. Although they really wanted to have a baby, well, for them, it just wasn't possible. One day his wife went to the old witch and told her she wanted a baby. "Don't be sad, my dear girl. Where there's a will, there's a way. Take this seed and plant it in a pot and wait and see. You'll be surprised." His wife was very happy. She thanked her with joy. In return for her amazing favor, she gave the witch some money. Later on, she went straight home and planted the seed in a pot. With great patience, she began to wait near the pot. Soon later, a big tulip-like flower began to blossom. Right that moment, she thought to herself, "What a beautiful flower." With its leaves still unfolded, she reached over and kissed it. Short after, the leaves began to unfold. In the flower was a child sitting down. With great confusion, the lady picked up the tiny girl in her hand. "What a tiny little child you are! Your name should be Thumbelina." The lady made Thumbelina's crib out of a walnut shell, her mattress from violet leaves, and her blanket from rose petals. Thumbelina managed to adapt to her new life with ease. At night time, she would sleep in her bed that was made just for her, and during the day she would play on the table and sing songs. One night, while she was sleeping in her bed, an ugly frog appeared from the window. It saw the little girl sleeping in a walnut shell.
Rabbit, oh my, what a tiny and beautiful girl you are. You'd make a great friend to my son.
As fast as it could, the frog grabbed the walnut shell and went out the window. Right near the house was a swamp. The house in which the ugly frog and his son lived in was right here. The son of the ugly frog was just as ugly as his father. When he saw the tiny girl his father had brought him, he croaked at the top of his lungs.
Rabbit, rabbit. Stop croaking. You're going to wake the girl up. If she wakes up, she will run away in fear. Rabbit.
The father and son decided to make the little girl a place where she could stay. Father Frog had a great idea.
Let's place the little girl on one of the lilies over at the stream. Being surrounded with all that water, it will be impossible for her to get away.
Father Frog took Thumbelina with her crib and placed it on one of the lilies. In the morning, with the sparkling light of the sun, Thumbelina woke up. When she noticed she wasn't at home and saw that she was surrounded in water, in fear she began to cry.
Where am I?
Father and son frog went over to get Thumbelina.
Here's your new friend. I'm preparing a great new home for you. It will be in the very deep waters of the swamp.
Father and son took Thumbelina's crib, made from a walnut shell, and swam off, leaving her right there on the leaf. At that very moment, some red fish were swimming along, and they overheard what the ugly frog was saying. They couldn't stand the idea of an ugly swamp frog upsetting such a beautiful girl such as Thumbelina.
Don't you worry, little girl. We are going to save you.
All together, they chewed on the stem of the lily where she was sitting on, and they broke it. All alone now, the leaf got caught in a rip current and managed to get away. Making way on the current in her green leaf left all the birds with great admiration.
How beautiful and tiny she is.
As she was on her way, she passed a rather big maybug. He grabbed her as fast as he could and landed on a tree. Finding herself on a tree, Thumbelina was very frightened.
What type of a bug are you? And why did you bring me here?
I'm a Maybug, and I have never seen a bug such as yourself before, so I wanted my friends to see you.
Later on, all the other Maybugs sitting on the same tree came around to visit Thumbelina. Trying hard not to show it, all the Maybugs were jealous of her amazing beauty.
You're a funny creature.
How rickety, doesn't even have wings.
How ugly! You can barely look at her face.
You are free to go wherever you want. We don't want such an ugly thing being near us.
Thumbelina spent the whole summer all by herself. She overcame her hunger and thirst by drinking the water of the flowers. A long time passed and the weather began to cool. Because of her summer clothes, she got cold. A field appeared from afar. The field was covered in straw. After a long walk, Thumbelina made it to the field. Under the straw, she managed to find a field rat's home. With a chance on finding some food, Thumbelina knocked on his door and asked for some barley. Kind-hearted field rat took her in. She got in that instant and ate up all the food the rat had offered. The field rat really liked Thumbelina.
If you tell me a story every day, I will allow you to stay with me to the end of winter.
With great satisfaction, Thumbelina accepted her offer.
Today my neighbour will come by. He's in better condition than me. If you go with him, you'll be very comfortable. But keep in mind, he has very bad eyesight. You will need to tell your best fairy tales and occupy him forever.
A little while later, with his velvet fur on his back, appeared a mole. Thumbelina wasn't very fond with the mole, but she didn't want to disappoint him, so she agreed to sing a song for him. Fly, fly, ladybug, wedding will be tomorrow. Mommy will buy you new shoes and clothes tomorrow. Even though he had poor eyesight, the mole realized he liked Thumbelina very much and decided to take her home.
I managed to come all this way by digging a hole and making a tunnel. If you like, we can go the same way and I can show you my house.
Thumbelina was hesitant to go. Seeing the rat agreeing, Thumbelina accepted his offer. They managed to make their way. During this time, they saw a swallow lying down on the ground with its wings on its side and its head and feet tucked under its feathers.
This bird wasn't here when I was coming. It must have just fallen through the hole.
Thumbelina thought about the birds in the forest and remembered them chirping above her. She couldn't handle the sight of them being in this state and was very sad. Without the field rat or the mole seeing, she turned to the swallow and gave it a kiss.
This bird could be one of the birds that was chirping during summertime. If that's so, then I owe him a lot. Come on, Thumbelina, we are waiting for you.
She couldn't sleep that night. She knitted a quilt with the straw, went to the corridor and covered the swallow. She wet the mint leaf she used as a blanket and placed it over its head.
Please be better soon, sweet little bird.
The following day, Thumbelina went over to see the swallow and saw that its eyes were open. I don't know how to thank you. You took such good care of me. Now I will recover in no time. Once I have totally recovered, I will be able to go next to my friends in warmer countries.
It's very cold outside. You should rest in your warm bed and recover at once.
After Thumbelina was done giving advice to the swallow, she brought some water with the help of a flower petal and helped her drink it. And later on, listen to how she broke her wings, smashing into the bushes. The wounded swallow wasn't as fast as her friends. She was tired, and so she fell. At last, spring had sprung, and the sun began to warm the land once again. The swallow knew that it was time to say goodbye to Thumbelina. "Would you like to come to the forest with me?" "I would have liked to come with you, but my friend the field rat would be very sad. I can't leave her." "In that case, farewell, Thumbelina. Maybe someday we will meet again." With teary eyes, Thumbelina watched the swallow fly away. With summer ahead, Thumbelina's worries began to arise.
It is summer now. Now that the third mole would like to marry you, we should get some beautiful clothes together.
When winter is here, be ready to live with me underground in the soil, Thumbelina.
Before Thumbelina began her life underground where it was cold and dark, she went outside for the last time to see the sun. Just as she was about to enter, right above her head, she heard a bird. When she turned her head up to have a look, she saw her most loved swallow. Thumbelina told the swallow that she was being forced to marry the mole and that she had to live underground where there was no sunlight. "Winter is nearly here. We are preparing to go to warmer countries. Please come with us. You've saved my life. I would like to pay you back." This time, Thumbelina accepted the swallow's offer. And off they went. Thumbelina and the swallow flew away over the forests, seas, and the mountains covered in snow. Later, the two friends arrived at warmer countries. These places were amazing. The sun was brighter and the sky was shimmering. "This is my home. Please pick the best flower for yourself." "This is beautiful." The swallow placed Thumbelina in a beautiful flower. Amongst all this beauty, Thumbelina was very happy. Sitting in her flower and looking at it in detail, she was mesmerized. In the flower sat a tiny man as shiny as glass. This man was the fairy of this flower. Every flower had its own fairy. He was as tall as a finger. He had shiny wings on his shoulders and a golden crown on his head. It was the first time the handsome fairy had seen a beautiful girl the same size as he was.
What's your name, beautiful girl?
"My name is Thumbelina." The fairy took his crown off his head and placed it on Thumbelina's head.
If you marry me, you will be the queen amongst all these flowers. You will live a very happy life.
After having lived such cruelty, being in such beautiful environment, Thumbelina was very happy to hear such a great proposal from the very handsome fairy. The fairy held Thumbelina's hand, and right at that moment, two wings appeared on Thumbelina's shoulders. Thumbelina was now the fairy queen. Together they lived a long and happy life. With her golden hair, always smiling face, Pollyanna was a 10-year-old little girl spreading joy around her. But she had lost her parents when she was really young and was left all alone. For some time, she stayed in the orphanage. After some time had passed, her wealthy aunt accepted to look after her. Her aunt, Miss Polly, prepared the small attic for Pollyanna. The housemaid Nancy was really happy about this.
Hopefully our little guest will be successful in cheering up grumpy Miss Polly.
When arrived at home, Pollyanna was crying with happiness. She hugged her auntie around her neck, but her auntie was somewhat serious. She took Pollyanna and showed her to her room. Pollyanna was stunned when she saw the size and the wealth of this house. Her auntie showed her room in the attic. "This is your room, and dinner starts at 6 p.m. Don't forget." Pollyanna liked her room very much. Having seen all the other rooms in the house, Pollyanna did not bother to think once as to why her auntie gave her the room in the attic. Right at 6 o'clock, Miss Polly sat at the dinner table, but Pollyanna had not arrived yet. Where is this girl?
Would you like me to go and call her, Miss Polly?
No. After dinner, Miss Polly went over to her room and noticed the room was empty. She immediately went over to the garden to tell the gardener that she was missing. The gardener, on the other hand, pointed over to a rock on the hill. She was over there. In a rush, Nancy ran over to Pollyanna, and together they made their way to the villa. Didn't matter what the situation was, Pollyanna always managed to keep a positive attitude about everything. This left Nancy amazed. She asked Pollyanna what the secret to this was.
The glad game. My father taught me this. When I was young, a very helpful lady once sent us crutches. When I asked as to why, she said, so that as long as they were in our sight, we would be able to appreciate the fact that we didn't need to use them and be glad. It is because of that day that whenever me and Daddy feel like we're in doubt, we think of that day and we find a reason to be glad.
Further into the evening, Pollyanna was in her room on her bed, crying hysterically.
Father, my father who lives amongst the angels. I'm trying to play our game, you know that. But if you were stuck in an attic, in the dark, sitting all by yourself, you too would find it hard to be glad.
The following day, Pollyanna went downstairs to the garden and hugged her auntie.
Auntie! Beloved Auntie! This morning I am so grateful to be alive.
Is that how we say good morning? After having said this, Aunt Polly turned around and left. Watching them from afar, the old gardener's eyes went watery. He then went over to Pollyanna and told her how much she looked like her mother. Knowing that the gardener knew her mother made her happy. As time went on by, Pollyanna's life at the villa had gotten better. She would have her breakfast, then straight after, start doing her homework with her auntie. And then after lunch, she would have free time until 6 o'clock. She would even do some of the grocery shopping for the house. One day, in the town, she saw a man wearing a long black coat with a cylinder-shaped hat. Although she tried being friends with him, she couldn't make much sense out of what the man was saying to her. Some time had passed and she saw the same man again. She tried to talk to him once again. This time round, he too made conversation with her. Nancy was in shock because although the man, Mr. Pendleton, was very wealthy, he lived in a huge house all by himself and never ever did he speak to anyone. The following day, Pollyanna went home with a very weak dog. Miss Polly didn't say a word. But the following day after that one, she brought a boy home and Miss Polly was extremely cross with her. Enough, Pollyanna. Amongst all the other hideous things you've done, this is by far the worst. As if it wasn't enough that you brought all the cats and dogs from the streets, now you're bringing beggars to my house.
I'm not a beggar, madam.
After having said that, the boy rushed out of the house, but Pollyanna was determined to save this kid from the streets. In September, Pollyanna started school. It didn't take long for Pollyanna to like her school. One day, during a visit, Mr. Pendleton asked Pollyanna not to leave and if she could stay with him. Of course, it was impossible for Pollyanna to give an answer. Mr. Pendleton explained everything to Pollyanna.
Back when I was young, I fell in love with your mom. I loved her dearly. But your mom never loved me back. Then soon later, she married your father, and they moved away from the city.
Ever since that day, Mr. Pendleton always seemed to be upset towards the world around him. He would always have a long face. But having Pollyanna look like her mother with her sincere looks made it possible for him to look at the world in a more positive manner. This way, by having Pollyanna next to him all the time, he would have a reason to live.
Move next to me, and together we will be happy. You can see me as a father, and I'll see you like a daughter.
But although her auntie didn't show it, she knew she loved her very much. And she didn't want to leave her auntie. She didn't know how to tell this to Mr. Pendleton. At last, she found a solution. She wanted Mr. Pendleton to take Jimmy in, the kid her aunt refused to look after, and thought this way both Mr. Pendleton and Jimmy would be happy, and Pollyanna could visit them both more often. Mr. Pendleton asked for them to come together the following week. But after a few days, a very unfortunate accident happened. A car hit Pollyanna. After opening her eyes a day later in the hospital, Pollyanna was very happy to be alive. She didn't want her auntie to leave her side. She was living the happy moment of her auntie calling her my darling. A few days later, Pollyanna had left the hospital, but she could no longer use her legs. When Mr. Pendleton visited Pollyanna, he told Miss Polly about his offer to Pollyanna and how she rejected the offer due to her auntie. After hearing this story, Miss Polly's love suddenly grew much bigger for her. Just so that her niece would be happy, she would allow the cats and dogs to go up to her room. She would allow anything that made Pollyanna happy. The doctor that they had been waiting for from the city came 1 week late. After Pollyanna's checkup, the doctor had to give the bad news.
Unfortunately, this young girl will not be able to walk.
Oh no! After hearing this, Miss Polly began to cry and soon after fainted. After hearing her auntie's voice, Pollyanna began to cry hysterically. Right then, everyone was waiting for bitter, sad days. Everyone was shedding away their tears for her. Pollyanna began to tell everyone that visited her about the glad game. In order to make Pollyanna happy, Mr. Pendleton decided to adopt Jimmy. When Pollyanna heard the good news, she was so happy. Miss Polly couldn't believe that she was the only one that didn't know the glad game. Once she began talking to Nancy, she found out about everything. She then quickly rushed over to Pollyanna. So, the glad game. From now on, we will play this game together.
Yay! This is by far the best news, Aunt Polly!
Meanwhile, Mr. Pendleton's doctor wanted to see Pollyanna. But there was one problem. Due to an argument they had many years ago with Miss Polly, he hadn't stepped a foot into that house for 15 years. In the end, both ends had come to an agreement and they took her to a hospital out of the city. Mr. Pendleton's doctor looked after Pollyanna and said that there is hope. A few months had passed. Auntie Polly received a letter from Pollyanna.
Dearest Aunt Polly, I have great news. My therapy has ended with great results. At last, I can walk. The doctors here say that I can return home soon. Wish I could walk the way back. Oh, how happy I am. Everything makes me happy. In fact, I'm even happy that I couldn't use my legs for some time. Because if it didn't happen, I would never appreciate them as much as I do now. Hoping to see you soon. With love, Pollyanna.